I'm excited that we're at the end of this series, Through the Fire. I've talked to so many of you about this series and about the impact that it's had on you because there are times that we just walk through difficult seasons, aren't there? You see, in week 1, Benji talked about how sometimes when God calls us to do something great, that it's scary to step out alone and to do that. Or sometimes we find ourselves in the fire and we know God is going to show up. And when he does, how it's this amazing thing that with God in the midst of that we can do anything. And then in week 2, we kind of got a little sad because we talked about sometimes that doesn't happen, right? Because we've all lived life before and we know that sometimes you go into the fire and it seems like you don't get rescued. That the thing that you thought was going to happen doesn't happen. And we're sitting there and you wrestle with, well, what do you do with that? What do you do when it seems like God doesn't show up like you thought he would? And that's what we talked about last week. But what we're going to talk about today as we close this out is that kind of middle part. The moment where you kind of are going to step into the fire and you're praying and you're just waiting and you're waiting and you're praying and you're hoping and you're waiting and it just seems like nothing is happening. And you just wonder, like, God, what do I do now? I mean, what do you do when you're kind of in that, call it meantime? You know, in the meantime, while you're waiting on that answer, while you're waiting on that direction, what do you do then? I mean, what do you do? Because we all have problems, don't we? We all have situations that we're kind of in the meantime on. So the big question that we're going to ask today is, what do you do when you feel like there's nothing you can do? Have you ever been there before? In a situation that it just kind of is what it is and it looks like that's just going to be what it is? Maybe for you, maybe it's like your marriage. And you feel like you got into it and the person you married isn't the same person you're married to and you're wondering, what do I do now? And maybe you're not fighting all the time. Maybe there's just this distance that didn't used to be there. And you feel more like roommates and there's these like little humans running around that share your DNA and you're wondering, well, what do we do now? I'm not going to leave or they're not going to leave, but what do I do? Because I feel like there's nothing I can do. Or maybe it's when it comes to your kids. And you told them for so long as they were going through school, you were told them, hey, listen, your grades matter. Hey, your grades matter. You need to study. Your grades matter. And they graduated. And now they're saying, oh my gosh, my grades mattered, right? And you told them, hey, your friendship group, they're going to take you down a certain path. They're going to take you a certain direction that you don't want to go, and you're telling them that, and you're telling them that. And then they get to be like mid-20s, late 20s, and they're like, where am I? It's almost as if my friends took me down this path that I didn't want to go on. Isn't it amazing? I know I've experienced this in my life, that my parents got smarter the older I got. You know, like in high school, my parents were dummies. They didn't know anything. But then I got to be like an adult, and I was like, they got smarter. Their advice is actually sound advice. What? Look at that. Like, so apparently parents take courses as they get older too. So, you know, and you're looking at your kids and you're going, I can't make the choices for them. What do I do with that? Because I feel like there's nothing I can do. Or maybe for you, it's your job. And maybe you're not laid off. Maybe you're in a job, but it just feels like a dead end. And you've been wondering, what more can I do? Maybe I start my own business. Maybe I try something. Maybe I jump out there. But it's getting to the point where you're going, I can't do that anymore. Well, do I just stay stuck in this dead-end job that just feels so lifeless? I come to church and hear people talk about vision and dream and doing things for God, and I just got to turn in another TPS report. Like, what do I do with that? I mean, what do I do in the meantime? Well, where do I go from here? Or maybe it's financial. You have these dreams of someday retiring and your 401k looks a little bit more like a 101k and you're going, I'm not going to be able to retire like I thought. I thought the life that I wanted to have, I don't think I'm going to get to have. Or maybe it's much more personal than that. Maybe for you, you've prayed to have kids and you just haven't. You've tried everything and you've talked to everyone and everyone's got their advice and their ideas, but just nothing is happening. There's no movement. And it's like a million knives in your heart when you hear another couple talk about accidentally getting pregnant. You think, well, that's great for you. What do I do in the meantime? What do I do in my meantime? So there's so many different ways that we find ourselves in the middle of situations that we wish we weren't in. And we find ourselves, if we're not careful, looking at other people and jealousy growing in our hearts. Feeling like, why is it that I'm living this life and they get to live that life? Because it's always greener on the other side, isn't it? And you think, that person's living my life. What life am I stuck living? There's some lucky person who lucked out of a really bad life that I'm having to live. You get jealous. And then you have really well-meaning and annoying Christians come to you and tell you, oh my gosh, God just answered my prayer. God is so good. He just answers prayers right on time. You, being the good Christian, you ask, really, what prayer did he answer? And they say, oh, well, I'd lost my keys. And I was like, God, where are my keys? And I prayed to God, and who wouldn't know? Just a little bit later, my husband came home early for work because he does that. He is amazing. Isn't he the best? And he came home early from work, and he opened the door, and guess what I heard? My keys jiggling in the door. God answered my prayer. Isn't God good? And you think, God, stop my fist from slamming into their face. Lord, if you're real, right? And you're like, well, good. But what do I do now? That's great that God answered your prayer, but what do I do? What do you do when it seems like there's just nothing you can do? And sure, you can try to self-medicate. Sometimes you can try to eat those emotions away. Or you can try to drink your problems away. Or you can try to run into his arms or run into her arms. But all of those options are bad options. They just create more problems. You see, in life, sometimes there's problems that can be solved. And then there's also just unsolvable problems. And sometimes there are tensions that can be resolved. And other times there are just unresolvable tensions. And in the midst of that, what do you do? Well, what I want to encourage you with first and foremost is I've been there more times than I care to admit. And I think by looking out across this room, watching heads nod, yeah, I've been there, I think you can find some solace that you're in a group of people that are kind of like you too. That we've all had those moments before. And what's even more encouraging for me is to look back at church history and see that church history is full of people that have experienced that very same thing. In fact, one of the most famous Christians, followers of Jesus, is this guy. He wrote over half the New Testament. He planted multiple churches. He's like this guy that's doing all these things in the early church, and he experienced this too. It's a guy by the name of Paul, and he wrote this letter. In fact, wrote many letters to churches, but there's one in particular where he talks about this problem that he has. And you can find it in the book of Corinthians in your Bibles, and we're going to put it up here on the screen. Paul's writing, he says, so I wouldn't become proud of myself, I was given a problem. We've all had problems before. He goes on, he says, this problem caused pain in my body. It is a messenger from Satan to make me suffer. 3 times I begged the Lord to take it away from me. Some of you hear that right now, and you're thinking, I get it. This makes so much sense to me. My children are messengers from Satan sent to cause pain to my body. I finally figured it out, right? Like my kids, I've got a new nickname for them. They're going to run by and you're like, there go my little messengers. There they go. If you have a newborn, your spouse is going to elbow you in the middle of the night and go, honey, your messenger is calling, right? You have to get up. And at those times, you're so irrational. I'll never forget with Landon, like laying there and him crying at night and Kelly looking over and telling me, I will give you $1 million if you can make him stop crying. Like all rationality just flies out the window in those moments, right? And we look at this and we're like, man, look at Paul's perspective on this thing. He's begging God to take this from him. Have you ever been there before? When you're begging God for something? Which is kind of funny when you think about it, because I think it reveals a little bit of something about how we look at God. Because, I mean, imagine the scenario where you begging God gets him to move. Like you ask God for something, he goes, nah. You're like, God, please, I really need this. And he goes, I'm really kind of busy with some stuff. And you're like, God, please, and you're begging, God, I beg you. And he goes, all right, I guess. I mean, that's not who God is. But that's where Paul finds himself, begging God, and we've been there. God, would you just answer this prayer? And we make these promises to God in moments like this that we don't really believe. God, I will give everything I own if you let me win the lotto. You know, it's like these like Hail Mary prayers, right? And Paul, he's begging for this. This is something that's causing pain in his body. And this is how the Lord responds. This is what Paul says. But he said to me, the Lord said, my grace is all you need. My power is strongest when you are weak. Do you believe this? Because here's where I find myself. I know I'm a pastor. I know I'm in church. So I know my right answer is yes. But can I be honest? This is hard for me to live out, right? I mean, can we just be honest? When we're in the meantime, and if someone were to come up to you and go, well, his grace is all you need. Like, no, a job is all I need. That's what I need. A paycheck is all I need. A mouth to feed. Someone on my arm is all I need, right? Like, whatever your prayer is, when you're in the meantime, it doesn't feel like grace is all you need. You don't sit there and go, oh, like, his power is made strong in my weakness. This is hard. When I read this, I look at Paul and I go, bro, come on. Throw me a bone here. Like, really? His grace is all I need? And so my question is, you might believe in his grace, but is it really enough? Is it enough? Yeah, it's one thing to sit here and cognitively assent to the fact, yes, as a Christian, I believe that his grace is enough. But to walk it out and to live it out, is it really enough? On its own, is it enough? Because for me, the honest answer is, unfortunately, no. It's hard for me to live this out. And even if we were to live this out, what does that even look like, right? I mean, sometimes Christians and pastors will say stuff, and his grace is all you need. His grace is sufficient for you. His power is made strong in your weakness. And you go, great. What? Like, how do I do that, right? What does that look like? And Paul, it's not as if things get easier. Look what Paul says. Paul goes on. He says this, so I am very happy to brag about how weak I am. Then Christ's power can rest on me. Because of how I suffered for Christ, I am glad that I am weak. I am glad in hard times. Paul, bro, ease up, man. Because for me, I am not glad in hard times. Way too often. I would not say I'm glad when I'm weak. But Paul keeps going. Check this out. He keeps going. Continues on. He says, I'm glad when people say mean things about me. Anybody else? Show of hands, right? Glad when people say mean things about me, right? And then he keeps going. I'm glad when things are difficult. Anybody? Anybody want to sign up for that one, right? Nope. Okay. And I am glad when people make me suffer. Again, Paul, really? When I am weak, I'm strong. And when I look at this, when I would read this, at face value, I'm going, I don't know if I could ever get there. I'm glad when people say mean things about me. I'm glad when things are difficult, when I suffer. Paul. And even more, if you know a little bit of backstory, this church he's writing this to, the church in Corinth, some of those people are the very people that were saying mean things about Paul. So Paul's writing this letter saying, hypothetically speaking, if someone were to say something mean about me, I'm glad. When I suffer, I'm glad. And he's writing this letter to those very people that have made him suffer, that have made things difficult for him. So I'm going to go back because here's the thing. When we hear this, it sounds like, okay, but how do we get there? Sure, that might sound great to be, when you're weak, you're strong. Like, I want so bad to believe that because I feel so weak so often. How can I find strength in that? How do I find strength in the midst of that? And more than that, to go back to our original question, what do you do when there's nothing you can do? When you're just there? See, I believe that Paul discovered a truth that can really help us. See, if you look at the totality of all of Paul's teachings, of all of Paul's preaching, I think one thing is true. I think when he was writing that, he was probably writing to himself. Because what I love about the Bible is it's not written by a bunch of guys that are perfect. It's written by a lot of people like me and like you that are very imperfect. See, in other places, Paul wrote things like, the things I want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do, I do. There were moments that Paul said, I want to rejoice in this weakness, but I can't. Because remember, he begged for this to be gone. It's almost like Paul is preaching to himself, reminding himself, your grace is all I need. When I am weak, I'm strong. Your power is made perfect in my weakness. It's like he's telling himself this, reminding him of this, himself of this. You know why? Because in the midst of that, what often happens is we get bogged down and we just sit in the middle of the meantime. We don't know what to do. We don't feel like there's anything we can do, and we just kind of sit. Well, it is what it is, and it's going to be what it is. So what do you do when it feels like there's nothing you can do? When it seems as if there's nothing you can do? You know what you do? You do something. You just move forward. You keep fighting. You keep praying. You keep believing. You keep moving. You keep trusting. You keep preaching to yourself. Even when no one's preaching to you, you say, I'm gonna keep moving. I'm gonna do something. I'm not just gonna stop and stay in the meantime. I'm gonna move forward. You know the best way when you're walking through hell, you know the best way through it? Keep walking. Don't stop in the middle of it. Work through to the other side. When you feel like you're in limbo and you've got nowhere to go and there's nothing you can do something. Find something that you can do. Keep moving forward. See, I love that in the scriptures, these different things, Paul is challenging us. He's challenging us on something that's hard. And I think he knew something that can be helpful for us in this moment. See, because there's this ancient proverb written by this really, really wise person. And they said something that seems very counterintuitive that I believe can help us in this moment. And I think it was something that Paul knew. See, Paul would have had this memorized. He would have known this by heart growing up in the Pharisaical tradition. Paul would have known this. Paul would have known this truth. And in Proverbs 11, it says this. It says, the man who gives much will have much, and he who helps others will himself be helped. Now this seems really weird and really counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, the fact the man who gives much will have much. No, you know what we tell ourselves? The man who gives much doesn't have very much because he just gave it away, right? If you just keep giving, you're going to run out. The way you need to get helped is for people to help you. But this proverb is saying, no, the man who gives much will have much. And he who helps others will be helped himself. It's almost like this proverb is in line with some of Jesus' teaching. See, Jesus came to bring this kind of upside-down kingdom, this upside-down approach to how we live our lives. Jesus would say things like, do you want to find your life? Then lose it. Then give it away. The one who's first now, they're going to end up being last. And he who is last will be first. And he said, you want to be the greatest? Then be the servant of all. You see, we hear that and we think, that doesn't make sense, Jesus. But actually, if you think about our world, think about how things happen, we look at different people that have lived lives like that, we find out that it's actually true. We're inspired by the lives of people like Mother Teresa. We're inspired by lives of people like Nelson Mandela. These people that lived lives like that. We say, man, they lived a good life. Why? Because they gave much. Their life ended up having much. They helped other people. Their lives were helped in that process. So are you in the meantime right now? Are you going through it? Do you feel like there's nothing you can do? Do something. Help someone. Give of yourself. Serve someone else. Serve a mission bigger than yourself. Maybe you look at your work as just a place of employment, a place you get your paycheck. Maybe your perspective needs to shift. Maybe that's where you go to give. So I'm going to give life away today at work. I'm I'm going to encourage someone else that needs encouraging. I'm going to look for someone in my neighborhood that needs blessed. When I go out to a restaurant, I'm going to look for someone that I can be a blessing to, that I can help out. I'm going to give. In that process of helping others, I myself will be helped. Do you know why this is so important? Do you know why this is so powerful? It's because there is no exercise better for the human heart than reaching down and lifting people up. There is no exercise better for your heart. There is no exercise better for my heart than reaching down and helping someone up. You know, in the process of that, you know what happens? Your life gets better, and everyone else's life gets better. It's almost like Jesus was onto something when he said, I came to bring life and life to the fullest. Do you know why our mission is to help people become more like Jesus? Do you know why? Because I genuinely believe it will eternally make your life better. And at the exact same time, it will make the whole world better. At once. It makes your life better, and it makes the world better. That's why we want to be more like him. What did he do with his life? He spent his life giving it away to other people, serving the least of these, giving of himself. That's the example we have. So you, in the meantime, lift somebody up, help someone out. Can I be honest? I'd call it ironic, but I believe it was providential. We planned this series months and months ago. We knew on this day we'd be talking about giving your life away. When you're in the middle of the meantime, doing something about it. And it just so happened that right around this season, we're launching 3 services. Right around this season, we're saying, hey, we need more people to serve and to give of themselves. It's almost like we're saying that in the message too. It's almost like God has a plan in the midst of this. See, I believe that your service isn't limited to Sunday morning. This isn't the only place you can serve. Serve in your job, serve in your community, serve in your school, serve in your neighborhood. But we've got a need right here too. This is low-hanging fruit. Your church needs you. We all need you. Those people that aren't in this door yet, that haven't darkened those doors, that are saying, I'll never go to church, whose lives are falling apart, who need hope. They're going to walk through those doors, and they need you. After service, we had planned this Serve Team Rally, an opportunity to see all the different areas within Eikon, all the ministries, all the things happening here on a weekly basis. And we wanted to encourage you to sign up and to join those teams, and I want you to do that. When you go out of here, we're going to sing a couple of songs here in a moment. Amanda's going to come up and dismiss us from here. I want you to go out there. Check out a couple of those booths. Sign up to serve. And the reason I want you to do that is, one, for the people that aren't here yet. The other thing is, I want you to do it for your own soul. Because we need this. When we're in the meantime, the best life is a life that gives. Best exercise for a human heart is reaching down and helping someone up. You've got a chance to do that every single Sunday. Would you do that? Would you make that commitment to give of yourself? And maybe, just maybe, if you've been praying, what do I do in the midst of this? Maybe as you help other people, you will find that you yourself are helped in that process. Amen? Let's pray. God, I thank you so much.